Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Making Markets Multitask, Russian Medical Device Market Access, ISO 13485, and CE marking for medical device manufacturers. My name is Sarah Steck, and I'm the Legal and Regulatory Director here at GMed North America. As one of the largest importers of medical devices in the world, Russia remains a key target for medical device exporters. However, confusion over a recent regulatory revision may hinder some opportunities. We created this webinar to try and alleviate some of that confusion. For this webinar, I'll be joined by a special guest, Alexey Stepanov, the Regulatory and Quality Assurance Manager for Russia and CIS at Sorin Group. Alexey will lend his extensive expertise on the Russian medical device market and registration process. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions and answers today, but the question and answer boxes and chat boxes will stay up for you to submit your questions. After the webinar, we'll answer them and send the answers back to you in a couple weeks. Or, if you can't wait that long, you're more than welcome to send me an email or give us a call. As many of you know, we like to pick up the phone and we're pretty responsive over email, so you're sure to get a response. Also, if you have any technical issues, please let us know by typing it into the chat box and we'll try and solve them in the webinar. So now let's get started. So now that you know who you're talking to, let's see what we're talking about today. First, we'll go into a basic overview of ISO 13485 and CE marking, as well as the Russian medical device registration process, which Alexey will talk about. Then we'll get into how to leverage the items you've already collected for your CE marking submission and use them for your Russian regulatory submissions. And with that, let's get started. ISO 13485, the standard for quality management systems for medical device manufacturers, specifies requirements for a quality management system for an organization that has to be implemented for the design, manufacture, and putting on the market of medical devices. ISO 13485 helps medical device manufacturers meet both customer and regulatory requirements. It's an evolution from ISO 9001 and was created specifically for medical device manufacturers to meet their regulatory requirements. ISO 13485 is applicable not only to medical device manufacturers, but also suppliers of products and services to medical device manufacturers, including distributors. Likewise, many times sterilizers also have ISO 13485 certificates for sterilization services. Now, ISO 13485 is a voluntary standard for the EU, so it's a harmonized standard, EN ISO 13485-2012, but it may be required by other medical device regulatory authorities. For example, ISO 13485-2003 is required to market devices in Canada. Now on this slide, you'll see the main topics that are covered in ISO 13485. Now, even though these are the broad strokes, and if you've dealt with ISO 13485, you know that ISO 13485 is actually a little bit more detailed than what you see on this slide, you should still take a look at each topic in order to see the subtopics included in each of these main topics. For example, under product realization is where you'll find the design system requirements. Now let's talk about CE marking. The CE in CE marking stands for Conformité Européenne, or European Conformity. When the CE is affixed to a product, be it a medical device or something else, it means that the person responsible for manufacturing the product, according to the directives, declares that the product conforms to the applicable European Community provisions, and that they followed all necessary conformity assessment procedures. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that when you put the CE marking on your product, you declare that it conforms to any provisions that it needs to, and to make sure that it conforms, you follow the procedures to assess its conformity. So when you see the CE marking on different products, including everyday consumer items, it means that the manufacturer went through conformity assessments too. So now that you know what CE marking means, when was it created? CE marking was created by the New Approach directives. The new approach predates the creation of the EU, and it helped to harmonize standards across the different European countries and bring down technical barriers to trade. So, before the new approach directives came about, medical device manufacturers had to apply individually to each country, satisfy each country's requirements separately for all the different European countries. The new approach directives, however, harmonized and standardized essential requirements for devices, references to harmonized standards that give a presumption of conformity to specific essential requirements, and how competent authorities survey the market, and conformity assessment procedures. After the new approach came the global approach, which created the procedures for accrediting the various notified bodies. As a result of the new approach and CE marking, the EEA has an internal market with free movement of goods and no technical barriers to trade. This means that a medical device with CE marking that was granted in one of the member states can be launched on the EEA market as a whole generally. In the meantime, devices have stayed at a high level of safety and performance and a high level of health care. There are a few derogations among the different EU member states, mostly to do with the different competent authorities' authority over the country's medical device market. Specifically, registration in individual countries may be required depending on the type of device. However, CE marked goods can generally travel freely around the EEA with no barriers to trade. I should note here that a common misperception that CE marking means that the device is approved. A CE marking isn't an approval marking, but rather it's a symbol that the device conforms to all the essential requirements. Performing a conformity assessment is the method that manufacturers have to use to have the ability to put the CE marking on their products. By performing or going through the conformity assessment, the medical device manufacturer proves that his device conforms to the essential requirements in the directives. For devices whose conformity assessments require a notified body, the notified body performs the conformity assessments. As you'll see, Class 1 devices that aren't sterile or don't have a measuring function don't require a notified body to perform a conformity assessment. Some other products directives also require notified bodies to perform conformity assessments. The conformity assessments are included in the directives in the annexes. A breakdown of all the conformity assessments are on the next couple slides. On this slide, you'll see the conformity assessments that are included in the Medical Device Directive and the Active Implantable Medical Device Directive. The major conformity assessments are in Annex 2, 3, and 7, although as you can see, not all conformity assessments can be used with all classes of devices. Class 1 devices only need a declaration of conformity to receive CE marking, whereas Class 3 devices and active implantable medical devices require a full quality system assessment and a type or design examination assessment. And on this slide, you'll see the conformity assessments for IVDs. Now, a copy of the slides will be sent out to everyone registered for the webinar, which is why the previous slide and this slide I'm not spending too much time on. But you'll receive this slide, both this slide and the slide before, in your mailbox soon. Now, as you saw, conformity assessments depend on the class of the device. As the directives describe the conformity assessments, they also tell you which classes of devices follow which conformity assessments. For medical devices and active implantable medical devices, the directions to match the class of the device with the appropriate assessments are in Article 11 and Article 9, respectively, of that directive. For in vitro diagnostic devices, these directions are in Article 9 of the IVD directive. The directive pretty clearly points out which conformity assessments go with which classes, and for most classes of devices, there's a choice as to which conformity assessment you can do. The choice is up to the manufacturer, based on the business model, the device, and how much each assessment costs. Now, notified bodies are needed for most medical device assessments, specifically for all conformity assessments for all classes of devices except Class 1. Manufacturers also need notified bodies to do the conformity assessments for IVDs classified in Annex 2, Lists A and B, and some self-testing devices, depending on the assessment route that's chosen. And now I'll turn the webinar over to Alexey to talk about medical device registration in Russia. Alexey?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you in this podcast. My name is Alexey Stepanov, and I am delighted to tell you about Russian medical device registration system. Let me start with the historical context of the question, and let me show you the evolution of Russian medical device registration procedure within last 5 years. Till 2012, all medical devices have been registered under rules which were enforced in 2008. This procedure was relatively simple, fast but opaque. Average and typical registration lead time was evaluated as about 3-4 months. 1st of January 2013 was a day when new Federal Healthcare Act and new registration rules for medical device came into force. These legal changes, as far as the lack of clear guidelines and the replacement of major part of staff in Russian Medical Device Approval Agency, in the same time led to the fact that registration and approvals for medical devices were almost frozen within all this year. In 2014 there were slight positive changes because Russian Ministry of Health published official recommendations and secondary level guidelines for registration of medical device and softened registration rules. Nevertheless, registration time was evaluated in average as 9 months, up to 12 and even 17 months in some cases. For this year, we can see the same slight positive trend. Medical device regulator announced that number of rejections for registrations for medical devices was decreased by 3 compared to previous year. For the next year, for 2016, we can expect the new changes and new challenges because Russia, Kazakhstan and Belarus signed the Treaty on Eurasian Customs Union and harmonization of circulation rules for medical devices and harmonization of registration procedure. That means that we can expect new registration procedure which will be valid for Russia, Belarus and Kazakhstan since the 1st of January 2016. I would like to overview the main legislation and legal acts which regulate medical device circulation and registration procedure in Russia. First of all, this is the Federal Law 323 on the fundamental of health protection in the Russian Federation. This is the basic and fundamental law which regulates all aspects of national healthcare system. Articles number 38, 95 and 96 of this law are devoted to medical devices. You can find the definition of the medical device in the article number 38 of this law. The full registration cycle is described and regulated by Government Resolution number 1416, also known as registration rules of medical devices. These rules came into force in the beginning of 2013. The registration rules are completed by second-level decrees which describe separate procedures. So decree number 2N describes conformity assessment procedure for medical device, like technical testing, toxicological testing and clinical trials. Decree number 4N describes classification of medical devices and nomenclature classifier of the medical devices. Decree number 7N describes procedure for samples importation for registration of medical devices. Decree number 12N describes safety monitoring requirements for medical devices. Decree 1357N describes expertise of medical devices. And decree number 300N describes criteria for centers for clinical trials for registration of medical devices. Now some general information about registration process. First of all medical devices should be registered in Roszdravnadzor. Roszdravnadzor is a quite complex but short name of the Federal Service of Control of Healthcare in Russia, the branch of Ministry of Health, who is responsible for registration, post-market surveillance and control for medical devices. Here you can see the link to the official website of this regulator. In Russia, registration certificate for a medical device has unlimited validity period. That means that registration will be valid until the name of the model, the name of the device, or any technical or safety or quality parameters of the device are changed. In Russia, we have the same registration procedure for medical devices, for in vitro devices, for active implantable medical devices, and for some personal protective equipment. According to Russian registration rules, accessories are articles which are not considered as medical devices, but should be intended by manufacturer specially to be used together with a main medical device. These articles undergo the same registration procedure, are tested and listed in the same registration certificate as a main medical device. Now there are two classification systems for medical devices. The first is classification based on safety class. There are 4 safety classes: the first, the second A and second B class, and third safety class. This is quite similar to MDRF principles, but all safety classes undergo the same registration procedure. And the second classification system is a Russian nomenclature classifier, which is quite similar to GMDN structure. This classifier is effective since the beginning of 2015, and this code can be used for to understand the product grouping for submission for medical devices. Let me share with you some statistics about medical devices in Russia. Roszdravnadzor, Russian Medical Device Approval Agency, confirms that for now more than 37,000 medical devices are registered. This amount is provided both for domestic and for international medical device manufacturers. Here you can see as well the dynamics of number of approval per year for last 5 years. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that in 2013 medical device rules was changed, and major part of approvals in this year was done by old procedure, and only a small part, or 73 approvals, was made under the new procedure. For the last year, for 2014, official data about number of approvals is not yet available, but regulators said about 2,000 approvals, and highlight the fact that number of rejections was decreased by 3. The Russian definition of the medical device is quite similar to the definition of a medical device according to US or European regulations. There are 3 parts on this definition. The first is the list of items or articles which can be considered as medical device. The second is the indication for use, and the third is important criteria for exceptions for borderline products. This definition can be found in article number 38 of Federal Healthcare Act 323, or in clause number 2 of Government Resolution 1416, or medical device registration rules. I would like to draw your attention that registration is in Russia registration is required for medical software And as I just told, accessories for medical device should be registered and should be listed in the same registration certificate as the main medical device. In Russia, there is no need registration for medical devices for personal use. No registration required for custom-made medical devices, and no registration required for spare parts of medical devices. The authorized representative is very important for registration. According to clause number 4 of medical device registration rules, authorized representative is a legal entity which is authorized by medical device manufacturer to represent its interest in connection with circulation of medical devices in Russia, and in particular in connection with conformity assessment and state registration procedure, and in the name of which the registration certificate for medical device may be issued. I would like to draw your attention that authorized representative must be registered as a legal entity according to Russian law. Sometimes representative office of the manufacturer in Russia has no status of legal entity and cannot be authorized representative. It's important that manufacturer representative has proper legal form, and usually it is the distributor who take function of authorized representative. The legal manufacturer should grant the special authorization, usually in form of special letter, or state this in the power of attorney in the name of authorized representative. Authorized representative is mandatory for importation of medical devices, in particular for importation of samples for registrations. It is mandatory for customs clearance, for distribution, for technical service for medical devices. Authorized representative as well as mandatory for laboratory testing and other conformity assessment procedures, for clinical trials, and for state registration, of course. Authorized representative can submit registration dossier and can withdraw existing registration. Registration certificate may be issued in the name of authorized representative or in the name of any another representative of legal manufacturer in Russia. In this case, authorized representative cannot be shown in the registration certificate for the medical device. I will overview the full registration process. For every step shown here, I will provide detailed description in the next slides of my presentation. Please note that here I provided official timelines, which are currently stated in regulations, but unfortunately realistic timelines for the process are not such optimistic. So registration process can be divided into two phases. The first is preclinical phase and the second is postclinical phase. Time for clinical trials is not included into the registration procedure. Roszdravnadzor will suspend the registration and stop the watch in order to allow to applicant to conduct clinical trials by itself. First phase of registration consists of three steps: importation of samples, testing of the samples, preparation of the registration dossier, submission of this dossier, assessment of this dossier by Roszdravnadzor, and first phase of expertise. In order to import samples, special authorization must be obtained from Roszdravnadzor. This is the separate sub-process, which usually take about 5 up to 10 days. And as soon as authorization from Roszdravnadzor is received, samples can be imported into Russia and sent to laboratories for testing. I will cover detailed information about testing in one of the next slides. But here I would like to mention that approximate lead time for testing is about 30 business days. When testing is completed, testing results with other documentation like certificates, technical file, instruction for use, must be submitted to Roszdravnadzor with the registration dossier. Within 3 business days, Roszdravnadzor should assess this registration dossier. This is the step number 2 on this slide. And if this dossier is in line with requirements and in line with checklists and there are no additional requests, Roszdravnadzor will forward this dossier to expert body for expertise phase 1. Expertise phase 1 is step number 3 on this slide. The objective of first phase of expertise is to demonstrate that medical device has enough level of safety to start clinical trials. Official lead time for expertise is 20 business days. If the result of first phase of expertise is positive, Roszdravnadzor grants authorization for clinical trials, stop the watch and suspends the registration. Step number 4 here is clinical trials, which can be conducted as clinical data evaluation of full-scale clinical trials with patients. As I previously told, time for clinical trials is not included into the registration procedure. Once clinical trials are finished, the result of clinical trials should be submitted to Roszdravnadzor, who will recommence the registration process and forward clinical results to expert organization to expertise phase number 2. The expertise phase number 2, this is the step 5 here. On this step, this step will be conducted in the same expert body as the first phase of expertise, and this step officially takes about 5 business days. The main objective of expertise phase 2 is to review clinical results and based on it to assess the level of clinical efficiency of a medical device. If outcome of expertise phase 2 is positive, Roszdravnadzor grants approval and within 10 business days issues the registration certificate with unlimited validity term. I would like to repeat that realistic timelines for every step is not such optimistic as official timelines which are provided here. What is testing? As we discussed some minutes ago, local tests are mandatory before submission to the Russian Medical Device Approval Agency. Typically there are 2 types of tests. They are technical testing and toxicological testing. Applicant or local authorized representative can choose and conduct tests by itself in any of approved or accredited laboratories. The list of such laboratories is updated by Roszdravnadzor regularly and is available on its website. Official timelines for testing is 30 business days. Testing procedure is regulated by decree number 2N by Russian Ministry of Health. In limited number of cases, when samples importation is not possible, for example for capital equipment, testing can be performed under the form of data assessment or under the form of inspection of manufacturing site. Technical testing is mandatory for all medical devices. During technical tests, a laboratory confirmed technical characteristics which were provided in technical file and assess conformity with Russian technical GOST standards. Laboratory confirms a safety class and classification code of medical device. For active medical devices, technical tests must be completed by electromagnetic compatibility assessment, which is the part of technical tests. Toxicological testing are mandatory for implantable medical devices or any medical device or an accessory which is in contact with human body. Toxicological laboratory assess conformity with national biocompatibility standards. They are the standards similar to ISO 10993 and confirms biological safety of a medical device. In limited cases, for limited number of products with measuring function, like scales or glucometers, additional testing for measuring function is mandatory. I would like to repeat that samples must be imported before testing under the special procedure, and this special procedure takes about 5-10 business days. As I have shown previously, the registration dossier should be submitted to Roszdravnadzor, to approval agency, after testing. The dossier consists of documents from manufacturer, and I marked this part of documentation in blue here, and documents from Russian applicant or Russian authorized representative. I marked this part of documentation in orange here. So I divided all documentation in 4 groups. First is group A. This group is documents from legal manufacturer, which are related to the product, to the medical device. I called this group product specific. These documents are technical file or technical documentation, instruction for use for medical device, CE certificate, European Declaration of Conformity, and free sale certificate, and clinical review for a medical device. The second group, group B here, are documents from legal manufacturer which are not related to a medical device. They are the power of attorney or the authorization letter on behalf of legal manufacturer in the name of Russian authorized representative. This is a business registration. It could be extract from Chamber of Commerce or extract from FDA database. This is certificates of quality management system. Usually it's ISO 9001 or ISO 13485. And documentation which reflect relations between manufacturing sites and relation between legal manufacturer and manufacturing sites. Another part is group C and D, are documents from Russian authorized representative. These documents are, first of all, photos of every item to be registered, including photos for accessories. Normative document signed by Russian representative, signed application form for registration, results of local technical testing, result of local toxicological testing, and founding documents for Russian legal entity, for Russian authorized representative. Usually it is extract from Russian Chamber of Commerce or Russian tax authority. One of the most frequent question on documents are what is technical file and what is normative document. Normative document is the document which is usually generated in Russia and contains a summary on product technical description, summary of testing results, and a list of applicable national standards and methods of testing and control. Now some words about technical file. First of all, technical file must be provided and be approved on behalf of the manufacturer of the medical device. Authorized representative cannot generate and cannot modify this technical file in Russia. Technical file can be submitted as one document or as several documents. The technical file is usually examined by expert body during first phase of expertise. For now, the same format of the technical file is required for registration of medical devices of all safety classes. The main objective of the technical file is to provide technical and safety information to the regulator and to demonstrate conformity of the medical device to essential principles of safety and performance of medical devices. Russia has national standard GOST 54329, I mentioned it here, which describes requirements on technical documentation, and this standard is similar and harmonized with recommendations of Global Harmonization Task Force for technical documentation for medical devices. Let us have a closer look on information which should be provided in a technical file. First of all, this is the technical description, name, technical specification, and description of principles of work and operation for every part of medical device, every model, and every accessory. This information should contain product construction drawings for each component of the medical device and accessory. Then you should provide a statement of intended use and statement of indication for use with information of contraindications, side effects, adverse reactions, and precautions. Of course, safety class should be mentioned in the technical file. Then raw material statement with description of materials for each product component and for medical device and accessories. Safety and risk management data in form of risk assessment and risk control should be provided. Technical file must contain information about short description of manufacturing process, statement about sterility and description of sterilization and disinfection and purification methods and its validation, requirements on environmental protection as well as a description of packaging scheme, requirements on transportation, information about shelf life, storage requirements, and requirements for utilization. It's very important to mention the version of software if this information is applicable. You should provide as well the list of applicable international standards for a medical device in the technical file. Based on experience of last year, for 2014, the technical file is the most common source of questions and additional requests from expert organization during the registration process. The most typical issues with technical files which were announced by regulator are: first of all, technical file is submitted on behalf of authorized representative and not approved by legal manufacturer. As I told previously, the technical file must be provided only by a legal manufacturer and be approved by manufacturer. Lack of information about technical characteristic is also the reason of additional requests from expert body. Usually the most common request is information about software, information about technical service, and information about ways of utilization of a medical device. What happens when the registration dossier has been submitted? As I previously told, the dossier undergoes the first check by Roszdravnadzor. On this step, this is the rather formal check, and the objective of this step is to ensure that the registration dossier is in line with formal, administrative, and legal requirements. For example, Roszdravnadzor will check if the list of documents is correct and full, if a Russian legal entity was properly authorized to represent interests of legal manufacturer, if all state fees were properly paid, if all documents were provided in correct form, like apostille, legalization, and translation. And on this this phase, a registration procedure is not officially started, and Roszdravnadzor does not examine technical, safety or clinical information in submitted documents. So what are possible outcomes? If some required documents are missing or were provided incorrectly, Roszdravnadzor will issue official notice to authorized representative to eliminate these faults and to provide additional documents within 30 business days period. If authorized representative does not eliminate these faults within this time, the submitted dossier will be returned. The positive outcome, if the registration dossier passes this assessment, or if all faults were eliminated after additional request by Roszdravnadzor. In this case, a regulator officially initiates the registration procedure and forwards the registration dossier for expertise of phase 1 to independent expert organization. As soon as the registration dossier has been sent from Roszdravnadzor to the expert organization, the first phase of expertise is started. Now in Russia there are two expert organizations who can perform expertise of the registration dossier of the medical device, and it is Roszdravnadzor who decides which of these organizations will perform expertise of the registration dossier for every particular case. According to the law, direct communication between expert organization and medical device manufacturer or its authorized representative is prohibited. All information on this step is communicated via Roszdravnadzor. The main objective of the first phase of expertise is to examine technical and quality information in the registration dossier and to demonstrate enough level of safety in order to start clinical trials. Official lead time on this step is 20 business days, but based on experience for 2014, realistic time for this step can be evaluated is approximately 2 months. What information is checked exactly on this step? First of all, expert organization verifies if there are enough evidence that submitted device is a medical device. One of the important aspects is product grouping. By default, it is recommended to submit one medical device in one registration dossier, but in some cases, similar models or a range of similar products can be grouped and submitted in one registration dossier. Anyway, items can be grouped only if they have similar technical characteristic and similar code according to nomenclature classifier. Russian nomenclature classifier, as I told previously, is similar to GMDN classification. So if products have similar GMDN classification, they can be submitted in one registration dossier. Based on reports of regulator for previous year, the misunderstanding of product grouping is one of the common reasons for negative outcomes for expertise in 2013 and 2014. Then expert organization verify if all information about medical device is consistent in all documents in the registration dossier. Expert body examines technical file and the draft of instruction for use and verifies if all required information was provided. Expert organization examines result of technical and toxicological tests and verify if this information is consistent with technical file and if all local test standards have been covered by testing. Detailed description of the procedure of the expertise is provided in Registration Rules 1416 in Clause 22 and in the Decree 1353N by Russian Ministry of Health. Based on this examination, the expert organization makes a decision. Negative outcome is possible when, based on information provided, the expert organization comes to conclusion that potential risk is higher than potential benefit and cannot confirm quality or safety of the medical device. In this case, a regulator will reject the registration. If provided information in the dossier is not sufficient, or this information should be completed or corrected, regulator will stop the procedure and will send official notice to authorized representative, who will have 50 business days to provide this additional information to Roszdravnadzor. If this information is not provided, the registration dossier will be rejected as well. And the positive outcome, when expert body comes to conclusion that provided information demonstrate enough level of safety in order to start clinical trials. In this case, regulator will grant to authorized representative an authorization for clinical trials and will suspend the registration procedure. Now all medical devices should pass through clinical trials for the registration. The objective of clinical trials is to prove that medical device is achieved its intended use from clinical point of view and to determine any undesirable side effects. Two forms of clinical trials are possible for the registration. The first is clinical evaluation or evaluation of clinical data. Now this is the most common pathway in Russia. And the second is full-scale clinical investigation with patients, which can be conducted in limited cases. It is clinic or health center who decides in which form clinical trial will be conducted in this particular case. Both forms of clinical trials must be conducted in clinic or in health center, which are authorized by Roszdravnadzor. And the list such authorized and accredited centers is updated regularly and available online on the website of Roszdravnadzor. Any clinical trial must be started only after special authorization granted by Roszdravnadzor. Time for clinical trials is not included in the registration procedure. So evaluation of clinical data is assessment and analysis of clinical data to verify clinical safety and efficiency for the medical device which doesn't require patient involvement. The clinic can evaluate available information on clinical performance or safety data specific to device in question for European or US market, or other clinical studies reported in the literature, or clinical data for similar or comparable medical device. Full-scale clinical investigation with patient is required by regulations in limited cases. These cases are the new type of medical device, new unique or complex methods or technology for prevention, diagnostic or treatment, or in case when safety and efficiency of the medical device was not confirmed by previous procedure, by clinical evaluation. For full-scale clinical investigation, vote from ethical committee must be obtained to start clinical trials, and ISO 14155 standard is highly recommended by Roszdravnadzor as a guideline to conduct clinical trials with patients. After completion of clinical trials, the result of these trials are submitted to Roszdravnadzor, who will recommence the registration procedure and then will forward these results to expert organization for the second phase of expertise. The second phase of expertise officially takes 10 business days, but again for the beginning of 2015, based on experience, the realistic time for this step is about 1 month. So what exactly will be checked here? The results of clinical trials will be evaluated in the context of information provided in the registration dossier previously. First, expert organization will check the formal side of trials. For example, if clinical trials were conducted in the authorized clinical center, if proper authorization was obtained from regulator and from ethical committee, or if the investigation have been properly documented. Secondly, the design of clinical trials and the result of these trials will be examined. For example, if trials have been conducted in line with clinical plan, if the design of clinical trials is in line with ISO 14155 standard, checklist and recommendation, or if statistical interpretation of result is correct. Possible outcome of the second phase of expertise are similar with outcomes on the first phase of expertise. So in case when based on the result of clinical trials, expert organization comes to conclusion that potential risk is higher than potential benefit, or clinical efficiency or safety cannot be confirmed by these results, regulator will reject registration. If information provided in clinical reports is not sufficient, or there are any recommendation from expert organization to complete or to correct this information, the regulator will stop the registration procedure and will send the official notice to authorized representative, who has 50 business days to provide this additional information or to eliminate these faults. If this information is not provided within this period, the registration will be rejected as well. And the positive outcome when expert body comes to conclusion that information provided after clinical trials demonstrate enough level of clinical efficiency and safety. In this case, based on this conclusion, expert organization will send to Roszdravnadzor its positive opinion, and Roszdravnadzor will grant approval or registration certificate within about 10 business days. As a confirmation of approval of Ministry of Health, registration certificate for medical device will be obtained. As I previously told, registration in Russia for medical devices has no validity limitation. That means that registration certificate for particular medical device will be valid until the name of the medical device or the name of the model or any technical, safety or quality parameters are changed. Let's have a look on this document. Every registration certificate has a title page and could have one or several attachments. On the title page there are always registration date and number, the name of the medical device, the name and address of the holder of the registration, the name and address of legal manufacturer, the name and address of manufacturing site or sites, classification code according to Russian nomenclature classifier, safety class for medical devices listed on the title, technical OKP code, and dossier ID as some internal information of regulator. For attachment of the registration certificate, there is always the list of full list of accessories and additional manufacturing location or manufacturing sites if this information is applicable. We just discussed every step of the registration of a medical device, and let me show you the full process just for refreshment. I would like to repeat the main steps of the registration process. The first, samples, importation and technical and toxicological testing. The second is dossier submission and dossier assessment by Roszdravnadzor. 3 is expertise phase number 1 by independent expert organization. 4 is clinical trials in form of clinical evaluation or clinical investigation with patients. 5 is expertise phase 2 by the same expert organization. And 6 is final approval and registration of medical device by Roszdravnadzor. Now just some words about registration costs. Of course, due to enormous variety of medical devices, it's very difficult and even impossible to provide exact price for average medical device registration project. Nevertheless, here I would like to provide the main items of expenses to be considered before the start of registration. They are, of course, paperwork, testing, state fees, and clinical trials. The costs for every item is provided here. Please note that currency rate for Russian ruble is not very stable for the beginning of 2015. I would like to thank everyone for the attention and would like to use the opportunity of this webcast to invite everyone to my blog about medical device regulations in Russia, Eurasian Customs Union, and CIS countries. I try to post regularly on updates on what's going on medical device regulatory landscape, and I see the mission of this blog is to make Russian medical device regulations clearer. Please check it out on www.medicaldevicesinrussia.com.
Thanks, Alexey, for that really useful information. I appreciate it. Now, to wrap things up, let's talk quickly about how a medical device manufacturer can leverage the items they use for their CE marking submission for registering their medical device in Russia. So we went through ISO 13485 and we went through CE marking, and then we went through the Russian registration process. So now let's talk about how they can be used together. As Alexey mentioned earlier, your EC certificate, so your CE marking certificate, comprises part of your technical documentation for your Russian submission. In addition, many of the components that go into your Russian technical documentation are the same or very similar to what is required for CE marking purposes. Likewise, the Russian quality system requirements are similar, such that an ISO certificate can also comprise part of the technical documentation for your Russian submission. So the bridge between CE marking and the Russian registration may not be as long as you think. However, it's important that you partner with an expert in the Russian medical device regulations so that there are no hiccups for your specific submission. And that just about wraps it up. Thank you all for coming to our webinar, and a very big thank you to Alexey for all of his help and expertise. Today we talked about some basics for ISO 13485 and CE marking, and we talked a lot about the Russian medical device registration process. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to send out the slides in a PDF in about a week. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email or give us a call using the information that you see on this slide. If you're one of our clients, you know that we're always happy to talk and answer questions for you. Thank you again for coming to our webinar.